Can people sustain happiness?
That's
What?
Wow. Who wants to take that?
What's the second half of the question?
no
That's
one knows
it.
the answer to that.
Well, no, I mean, well, there's something to get some traction.
This is Potter. This is
Potter,
this is
start us
Potter,
off.
This is Potter's.
I guess my initial thoughts are that happiness is. It would depend on how one defines happiness.
It's really just opinionated.
But happy.
Your opinion on it
is a feeling, and yeah, no one is happy. Depends on how you define those things. Sustaining and happy. I mean, happy is a feeling. No one feels happy all the time. So if you're talking about sustaining happiness, like being happy all the time, well then no, that's not normal or natural. But if you're talking about happiness as like a contentedness, then yeah, I think it's possible to reach a certain sustainability as far as that goes. I don't know.
What other definition does sustainability have?
Again, I was saying, like, if you're talking about sustaining happiness, does that mean staying happy all the time?
Is happiness
Or
synonymous
staying
with
over time?
contentness?
Well, no, I think there's a difference between happiness and contentedness.
So let's define that difference.
That's a
real quick.
good question right there. What's the difference between happiness and contentness?
I don't know that I'm authority to define those two, but I see happiness. Happy is more of an emotion that one feels in an immediate passing way, the same way you do with anger or sadness, joy, whatever. Contentedness, I guess, is still a feeling, but I think it's one that can be experienced in a way that is more over time. Like you can feel content in a moment, but I think, at least as far as the way that I'm conceptualizing the definition, it's contentedness over a period of time that's not the same as like the roller coaster of emotional experience, if that makes sense.
Well, I the way to sustain happiness, obviously you're right? Like the emotional body doesn't sustain any wave. It's always waving, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's so, but to be into kind of like a mean or median result of it being generally content or generally happy compared to like generally fucking woe is me or like generally just because there are people like like again we go back to like the behavior, like the thought pattern, that what are you conditioned to learn? Are you conditioned to learn negative thinking, or are you conditioned to learn positive thinking? And how do you react to different reactions that cause you to think bad or even think good, and then you kind of sputter your way into bad? With a good thing, you can even do that. I'm sure like people that are depressed, something great happens, and then they find a way to make it horrible. So it's like, I think it's just a way of patterns and way of like, how can you change your thinking to be doing that? Like, see the good, understand the bad, but polarize it and see the good too. So I think it's a skill. I think it's not easy, and I think money's not the answer. I think maybe living to your true musical, and not meaning like actual music, but like in tune with your actual synchronicity to whatever that is.
Here's my gut reaction on the question. No, I like that. It feels
You
like
like
a
it,
microphone.
yeah.
Is happiness sustainable? The answer is no. Happiness is something you feel when you hit $20 on your lottery ticket, when your team wins the football game, and then it passes. It's fleeting. It's happiness. You feel happy when you start dating a girl that you love for the first 6 months. You're happy. You build contentness, which I think is way more important than happiness, with a series of life choices, I think, where you build the right people in your lives, you make the right career choices, you are physically healthy, you're mentally healthy, and that, if you set up those pillars correctly, is sustainable. But, what Randy said about just these waves of ups and downs, that's life. I mean, anything and nothing is sustainable in that regard, where you're just going to be up and down constantly. But if you have the right resources and people in your life, I think it makes it a lot easier to be happy, feel happy more often, and be content, which I think is the ultimate goal for me, is to feel content, to wake up and not be like upset with where I'm at and who I'm with and what I'm doing. And so happiness is not sustainable to me.
Yeah.
Can I chime in real quick and read
Yeah.
the general definition of happiness?
Yeah, what do you got for the general definition of
All right,
happiness?
so feeling or showing pleasure or contentment.
No,
Content what?
feeling or showing pleasure.
Pleasure or contentment.
Contentment. I think
Now,
it's
showing contentment can be different than feeling it. I feel like. I feel like
Feeling
you can
or
fake
showing.
show it,
But
let's
that's
not go
the
into that.
general definition of happy.
So that's funny that
It
content
is
is in
interesting,
the
yeah.
definition of
It is,
happiness.
But see, also pleasure is, which makes it that
Mhm.
dynamic.
Right.
Like
It's
the,
a combination.
Yeah, because like pleasure, I
Pleasure.
feel like
sex,
is
I mean,
a lot
the pleasure
more
feels
different
more
than
in-
contentment is.
Pleasure feels more into like what are synonyms for pleasure?
Pleasure is short term.
Like ecstasy, hedonism.
Contentness is long term.
Right.
Right? Pleasures.
Is it?
Well, like pleasure is pretty specific. It's like a specific feel.
What's the first thing you think of when I
It's
say
just
the word
let
what's
go,
pleasurable?
kind of like
Name something
Excitement.
pleasurable.
Anything that excites you.
pleasure.
I think of something very specific.
Ice cream.
Yeah, ice cream is pleasurable.
pleasurable to me. Yeah,
said
pleasure
sex.
like sex.
Sex is
definitely
pleasurable.
Ice cream, like
Sex isn't content. Like,
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, sure, like maybe.
The word pleasure has a sexual undertone anyway.
Yes,
like it's
that's
generally.
but not
connected.
really. Like
Well, it doesn't, but I feel like
Pleasure,
when people
I
say
think, like-
pleasure, that is what.
Socially,
I
it
always
does.
Socially, it's associated with sexual.
Yeah.
like hedonism. I think that's a perfect
Yeah.
word. Perfect word for pleasure, right? It's a hedonism. You know what hedonism is? Hedonism?
No.
Hedonism is like the pursuit of pleasure. It's like someone that's constantly seeking pleasure, like kings. They're like pleasure seekers. They just
And that's not sustainable.
no. You get fat. You get gout. You get all this bad
Constantly
stuff. You get-
unsatisfied, though, too.
Yeah, I mean, because you're always trying. Because like we run on a system, just like anything else. And if you're always fueling your pleasure system, then there's gonna be no little fucking things. Like just think about like a cannabis receptors. Like if you're smoking all the time, that first time you smoke or the first couple times you smoke, you have all those cannabis receptors to receive all of that. You have all that serotonin to receive that
come down.
first like pleasure moment. But I think natural pleasures are better than external pleasures. But is there any natural pleasure?
Oh, I don't know what you mean by natural, but yeah, I mean that's definitely a real thing. That like, you're talking about pleasure in terms of like very specific parts of the brain, in which pleasure is experienced, which are the same parts that pain is experienced. So if you start to balance pleasure, all the time or to a great extent, that's why you start to get like the rocking and rolling of people who are constantly seeking that. When you don't have that, like you said, they come down, and that's why it really sucks. Like when you're just experiencing normal existence, which might end up, be an abstinent or a sober or whatever, the absence of that pleasure is. But when you say natural pleasure, what do you mean by natural as opposed to external?
Riding a
Just no.
Bike.
Just what? No, let's go off what you were saying. Like what? You don't think it's possible for people to really see the natural pleasures? Like when we went on that trip and we didn't take any drugs or we didn't do anything, but we just put ourselves out there into the world and to see these beauties. There was pleasures that came along with that, like seeing these great sights. Just from putting, I guess that was like putting ourselves on limits, like pushing ourselves to the limits to like drive out to these random sites and against all odds and just see what happens. So that right there is kind of a risk. But I mean, there's always a risk, I feel like, to get the pleasure, right? Almost. At some level, there's like a little risk. But I mean, there's a little risk in walking out your door.
Do you have
Well,
to
yeah.
seek pleasure, or can you get pleasure from everyday tasks?
That's the difference. So
That's
like
within.
intention is the difference for pleasure to me. If you're intendingly trying to get pleasure from an external resource like cannabis or like whatever have you, sex, food, whatever. But if you're looking into a tree and then receiving pleasure from just the beauty of the symmetry of the tree, then that's a different thing.
I think pleasure from everyday tasks or items is
It's beautiful.
what gives you contentness.
Yeah.
Right.
If you
So,
if you can acquire that brain pattern.
If
or
you
that,
can wake up every day and sip coffee on your porch and be like, find pleasure in
Well,
that.
that's an interesting one though, because
caffeine.
yeah, I think
Oh,
you
drink
seem to be
tea or milk,
distinguishing
whatever it
like,
is. Like, whatever it is. I'm saying you in that
Okay,
situation. Like,
I know what you mean.
if there's pleasure in that situation, that calmness, that, or whatever it is. But
because they can go hand in hand, but you seem to be distinguishing like pleasures of the body as opposed to like maybe more abstract
Pleasures
Well, like-
of the mind.
pleasures of the soul. Of the mind.
Yeah, like I mean, just like
Which are more
simple,
Which they can be both at times.
simple, just like I don't know, like when we looked at those like crazy sights that we saw. I mean, I got pleasure out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And
is that
it didn't-
sustainable?
What?
Is that sustainable?
Oh, it's fleeting, man. I mean, that's but pleasure is definitely fleeting. Pleasure
I'm
is
saying
not
that
sustainable.
lifestyle. So like you're
Contentedness and happiness might be sustainable to a certain period of your life and chunks, but like I don't think pleasure. I mean, think about your orgasm.
how much of your life, how big of a goal is it for you to feel happiness or contentness on a daily basis? Is it something you guys are conscious about every day?
I am.
You are?
Yeah, but I live a very like, I like to pry like a little gerbil, so I'm not always content.
I'm saying when you wake up in the morning or halfway through your day, at the end of the day, do you think like, was I content? Is this something that's going to bring me happiness long term? Is it like, are you that much of a like long term abstract thinker, or are you just like in the moment? Today I'm gonna go to the gym, cook
I set
dinner,
off to
and
Cam.
watch.
Cam hasn't talked for a
TV.
while. I got some thoughts on that, but Cam, what do you have on
Ask it again.
that?
How
I
much
gotta
of like your conscious is like
How much of your consciousness is seeking this
contentness, pleasure?
5%.
Yes.
5%.
Studies show 5% conscious activity is towards your own worth and self. Being 95% is subconscious.
How do you feel? What do you feel like? What do you feel when you wake up? Do you feel like you're actively pursuing to make a life of like contentment, or are we going through the motions? That's kind of
On a daily basis, definitely going through the motions.
yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Survivability is almost the word that comes to mind for me. Of like, I'm not thinking long term right now. Like I'm just like, what am I doing to like get through today?
Yeah.
Which is like kind of fucked up. Like
It is fucked up.
Yeah.
like
I mean, you look for the ease of the day.
Yes.
Anything that makes your day